Hey, it's Jim from Sporlan. We're here today to interview some industry experts on the S3C. I'm Jim Jansen, a senior applications engineer with Sporlan, and I'm here in my beautiful office in Washington, Missouri. And joining us are Jim Reeder, former retired senior, listen to me, applications engineering manager, and Pat Bundy. And raise your hand, Pat. He's a retired senior applications engineer. And then over there, pretending to be Santa Claus in the summertime, is Dennis Setchfield, our e-business manager. That's global e-business manager. That's special. And we're here to take advantage of the knowledge of these two guys who have recently departed to go on to have fun in retirement and pick their brain about S3C stuff. So if you work on refrigerated cases and you're familiar with the control, you know that lots of questions come up. And these are two of the guys that used to answer all those questions. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Jim.
So let's just kick this off with, I'll start with this one. Tell us, and you take your turns, go however you see fit. And Dennis, you are recording this, by the way, right?
I am. Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right. Tell us about some of your more interesting problems that you solved out in the field when customers called us all hours of the day and night with S3C case control issues. You want to start?
Yeah, I can start with one, I guess. I guess just to kind of clarify what's interesting versus fun, or some of the best callbacks that we make. Sometimes it's really kind of fun when you call them back and they've already solved the problem. So that's always my favorite. Sometimes it's an RCU that may not have been turned on or not properly charged yet, and we're not making temperature down in the cases. So some of these issues are quite simple to fix, and by the time we call them back, they've already solved the problem. So those are my favorite. Might be no power or blown fuse or a trip breaker, something like that. So those are fun.
That springboards us into the next one. And hey, Pat, maybe you take this one. How often is the problem actually the S3C case control? And
very, very few occasions it's the actual controller. It could be and the way I troubleshoot, I look at it is it a new install or is it something that's been running for months or years? But if it's a new install, I recommend first checking for alarms. It may be alarming for an EEV open load, which means it can't find an EEV if it's programmed for it. It could be missing a temp sensor. It could be a transducer wired wrong. So, check your alarms. Now, if it's wired wrong, a transducer, it could be just throwing some bad information out there. So always be, aware of the basic, refrigeration principles. If something's not right, and the first thing a guy thinks in startup is I got to make this thing cold. And if it's not cold, if you're not getting alarms, check your valve position. If the valves show 100% open, but you have high superheat, maybe that valve's not open. Maybe it's programmed wrong. It thinks it's got TEVs, so it's not looking for an EEV, and it's not trying to open an EEV. So there's a lot of things like that. Just go down and look at all your outputs, pressure, temperature, valve position. And sometimes it could be a dip switch that's supposed to be set for an EEV or an EEPR. Other things, it could be EEPR, EEV cables are swapped, and so they're not controlling the right valve. So there's a lot of things at startup to look through, but like I said, it's a lot easier to go through the alarms and your outputs and kind of verify and check. If it's saying I've got 130-pound pressure, check to make sure if you got 130-pound pressure. Is your EEPR closed, or is it wired wrong? And sometimes they'll do that. They'll throw some strange pressure, 126, 130 pounds or something like that. So that's kind of
here. You mentioned TEVs and EEVs. Something that I remember coming up quite frequently is, yeah, I got a valve at the inlet of the evaporator, but I don't know what it is. How do I tell?
Then you got to kind of go through the steps. Well, you know, and there's three types of valves we could have feeding that case, feeding the evaporator. It could be a thermostatic expansion valve, and it's going to have a gray painted thermostatic element on it with a copper bulb at the end of it. It could be a stepper controlled EEV, which means you have to have it set up for stepper valves or 2,500 steps. Or it could be a pulse expansion valve, which we can call an electric valve as well. So there's really two electric valves. One of them is a pulse, which looks like a solenoid. It's a hybrid solenoid valve designed for rapid cycles. And the other one is a stepper. And they have to be set up appropriately for them to be controlled.
One of the things that was always kind of fun would be, how do I tell the difference between a TEV and an EEV? You know, I know I've heard JR, I've heard you say, well, the EEV's got a cable coming off of it, and they'll say, mine's got a cable coming off of it too. You want to elaborate on that?
We have to be careful on what's a cable, a sheathed electrical transmission cable for a signal versus just what might look like a solid copper wire. That is capillary tube that comes from the bulb to get the signal
of a TV.
So we do really depend on the hands, eyes, and ears of the on-site technician. Sometimes, unfortunately, they have to pull, have somebody pull product out of the cases, pull the pans, and just take a physical look to see what product has been installed in the cases. There's obviously, it's a real world that we all live in. Sometimes the spec might be one valve, but due to supply chain issues or just a change in plans from the store owners, they may have decided to go with a different type of expansion valve. So sometimes it just takes a physical look to really check, and then we can get the S3C properly programmed.
Well, and it brings up another point, because to get these, I mean, what happens? A contractor gets a remodel or a new install to do for one of these big box stores, and they want it done yesterday, And one of the things that I recall that was supposed to happen was, and I don't want to belittle the OEM in any way, shape, or form, because this is all has to work. We all have to work together as a team. Sometimes the programming didn't get done with correctly with respect to the job site. Like you said, changes got made. Maybe they didn't know about it. The OEM didn't know about the changes. They might have decided to put a different refrigerant in, or they might have decided to, change the location of the cases around it. And if you have to make changes after the fact, what are some of the ways that can be done?
Well, that's one thing that we really kind of jump into without mentioning. One of the best tools that the technicians now have to work with these S3Cs is the mobile app that Sporlan developed years ago, the Sporlan Tech Check app. Once they link in to the S3C via Bluetooth and their mobile phone, could be a Apple iOS or a Android platform, connect to it via Bluetooth, and there's just an immense amount of information that's right there on their mobile device. Superheats, pressures, temperatures, the valve types, defrost schedules, just a plethora of information available to them right there in their hands. So that's one of the great tools to use. They can get an idea of how things are going from that before they even reach out to a Sporlan application engineer. They can also, if they don't have the app or don't have that set up yet, they can get a lot of information right through the display module that's part of the S3C platform. So a lot of great tools out there before they reach out even to calling the Sporlan 888 number.
And when the case shows up and it's got the new S3C case control on it, sometimes if things have been done correctly, things can sometimes go awry. And I know you can sometimes get into issues with charging the system because the control's stuck in one mode or another. Either one of you want to elaborate on that sort of thing and what we would do to fix that? You know what I'm talking about there? Like
could be the charge mode, Pat?
Charge Pro mode, for instance.
Yeah, the charge mode allows them to charge the system. What it does is it opens all the valves. And so when they start feeding refrigerant, it gets, through the whole system. Sometimes they don't come out of charge mode. That's probably the biggest call we get is guy says it's stuck in charge mode. It will automatically come out of charge mode, typically, when it sees, I think it's about 15 pounds of pressure on the transducer. which brings up another thing that we see often is they ship, if they install the transducers prior to shipment, they'll ship them with that little service valve closed to the
Oh,
transducer.
wow. Yeah.
And so they're reading 0 PSI and they can't get them out of charge mode until they open up that service valve to the transducer. So that's another thing to look for is you may have a pressure reading, but that pressure reading is 0, and you know for sure you've got 45, 50 pound suction pressure. Find out why. And I've seen some situations where they couldn't get the EEVs open. Well, EEVs will not open if they can't get a superheat reading. And the superheat reading comes from pressure and temperature. So if your coil outlet sensor is not hooked up, or if your transducer is not hooked up, it says, I don't know what kind of superheat I have, I'm shutting down. And I've seen where transducers are shipped loose in the case and they don't get installed, or they're plugged in, but they're not installed on the line, and they're reading 0 PSI. So that's something to be aware of is your transducer reading, and is it reading correctly?
So we talked a little bit about at the beginning here, I think Jim Reed or JR mentioned this, but if you're not making temperature after you get everything set up, you want to elaborate on any other reasons why that might be the case, that you're not making temperature?
Well, sometimes what we'll find out is it's an air side issue. And we've talked about expansion valves and EPRs. The actual refrigerant flow is only part of the overall system. Seen a handful of times, more than a handful, I guess, where it's just bunkered up. Cases get bunkered up. It might be a store that's really just getting started. Maybe the front wall isn't even on the store. A lot of humidity, just a lot of ice buildup. So it could be an air side issue that's preventing the case temp from reaching its goal. There's sometimes panels. These cases are put together and shipped out pretty quickly, transported hundreds, if not thousands of miles sometimes. We've seen panels come loose, so you don't have the proper airflow coming back through. If it is a store that's been in service for a while, sometimes the cases aren't making temperature simply because of airflow system. Might be product that is beyond the load line. So I know the store managers and workers are trying to get as much product as they can on display, especially during holidays. So sometimes they're just not getting enough air around them, and they'll fail to achieve temperature. And you asked earlier about some strange things that we hear about, and as Pat was talking about the EPRs a moment ago, I've seen too many valves installed. There'll be some confusion, I guess, and maybe it's just documentation issues where the EPR might have been installed by the case manufacturer, but the contract was also set up for the field installers to install an EPR on the lines. So it can be a little tricky to diagnose some of these, and sometimes it's minutes, but sometimes it's hours before we come to the overall solution for a customer. But occasionally you'll have 2 EPRs on the same suction line going back, and if it's fully open, it's not that big a deal. But if it's, we typically ship them, Sporlan half open, 50% open. So if that's creating a constraint
On the electrically actuated version,
on
right?
the EPR, yeah. So that can cause some problems. Yeah.
In addition to that, Jim, I've seen where it's a startup or a retrofit overnight, and they're putting everything on a loop, and they've still got their mechanical EPRs in the machine house, and they've still got pressure settings on them. And they can't figure out why the EEV or EEPR, I'm sorry, EEPR is 100% open, and I can't get my pressure down. And they find another valve on the rack that's set too low.
Crazy. Hey, one of you mentioned the Tech Check app earlier, which is a real good diagnostic tool for people to get that tech. Did you mention how they go about getting the Tech Check app if they want it?
It is absolutely free to the general public. They just need to go to on their platform, on the iOS platform, the Apple App Store, and simply download it. Look up Sporlan, Sporlan, and it's probably going to be one of the top apps under the Sporlan platform, to be downloaded. So it's the Sporlan Tech Check app. It has a little guy in a hard hat, I believe, as the icon for the app. They'll fill out basically an email address, their name, and get things set up, and then the application engineering team will get them approved to make use of that app. And it's very powerful, a very, very powerful tool.
And it works perfectly well with iPhones and Android alike, right?
It does. There are some additional benefits. Thank
Oh,
you.
look there.
Dennis. Look at
That's
that.
it right there.
Yep. There are some other features on the Apple platform, the iOS platform, that go beyond a little bit above and beyond what we offer on the Google Android platform, but both will give you enough information to do some early diagnostics on the case, and as well as renaming the case ID. That's another issue that we've seen through the years, that cases just aren't really either placed in the exact spot in the store layout, or they had to get some cases going. Maybe the store owner changed their mind about the layout, post OEM manufacturer. So the Sporlan Tech Check app will allow them to rename that case ID, and that is critical in the whole BACnet language experience, so that we know which case is where and it's running properly.
And that brings up a point. If you've got C1 lineup and C2 lineup, and they've mixed cases between the two lineups, you could, depending on which one's controlling the EEPR valve, you have a lineup that's supposed to get 6 defrosts a day, and it's getting 12 because all of a sudden you've got another one throwing it into defrost. So when you have something like that going on, you got to go through and check your case IDs for everyone in that lineup and make sure they're all ID'd properly.
Got it. And if the cases, are not in the right spot, because that'd be easy to do in a heated rush, working overnight or in a tight schedule scenario. Besides going in with the Tech Check app, what are some other things you could do to correct that? Are there any other approaches that could be done?
They could use the display module itself if they don't have the app set up and not configured to be able to use that app properly. They can go through the display module with a daily passcode. They can call into the Sporlan Application Engineers, get a daily passcode. Typically, the person that answers that 888 number, I believe it's 888-920-6284. That person that answers the
Look at you.
call. Yeah, pretty good for old retiree guy, right?
Look at that.
That number is burned in my brain. I hate to say, yeah, but the person that answers that will likely have that passcode available, so that you don't have to wait for a call back from the engineer. So just ask for the daily passcode, and they'll get that to the technician, and then he or she can use that to access a lot of the different settings and parameters in that case, and change numbers rather than having to relocate the case, as long as the cases are equivalent.
Okay. Could you relocate the S3C case control?
You can also do that. Yes, you can do it by swapping display modules, and in some instances, you're better off just swapping the whole S3C and the display module.
Gotcha. Now, if
Brings
you
up
end up,
something.
you mentioned the application engineering staff that we have that helps with that. You two used to do that all the time. Are there changes that we can make remotely through application engineers here at Sporlan? Is that possible to do any of that? And if so, how would that happen?
It's possible, but as far as a case ID, that's open to the technician to change those case IDs if they want. Okay. So that's not a problem out in the field. Hey, one thing I also wanted to bring up when Jim was talking about fuses, sometimes during startup or installation, I should say, they'll pop a fuse, and sometimes they're hard to find those small fuses for the solenoid valve. Complaints will be a solenoid won't open, and probably the number one reason a solenoid valve doesn't open is a blown fuse. Now, there's other reasons too, where it says, hey, I've got floodback issues, I'm going to close down. But you can find possibly additional fuses on your valve module. If you're using multiple stepper valves, you've got multiple coils, you'll have valve modules installed they're not using that extra solenoid point on that board, so you could rob a fuse out of there to get you out of trouble. I just wanted to bring that up because that could save you a lot of time.
Again, kind of circle back to this. If you are dealing with one of our application engineers and you're a contractor service tech out in the field with this, is there a way for our application engineer to see what's going on with that case?
Oh yeah, there's a couple
How
different
would
ways.
that work?
Yeah, we
How
can
would
help
that work?
out. One is actually through the app, the mobile app, if they have that. Works probably the best through the Apple version, but I believe the Android is working as well.
Yeah.
We actually link in through kind of what we're talking about right now, a Zoom. It's a Zoom application. We can zoom in, actually gain access to their mobile device. We only see that app, the Sporlan Tech Check app. And by a Sporlan authorized person dialing into it, we can actually go through their phone. So it's cellular to cellular, and then from their phone via Bluetooth into the controller and help them make changes as well. And then the second option is the gateways. Pat, you want to talk about the gateways and that system?
What's a gateway?
A gateway, a lot of people call them routers, but it's a means of us actually getting into the store through the cellular network. And we can remote in and drill right into the store around the guy's phone, so we can actually make changes.
Gotcha. And those have to be plugged in appropriately? Do they need power? Do they have to be installed in a special place?
And I'll say in our quiz, we used to say that they don't have to be powered up all the time, but it's really kind of incorrect, because we do push firmware to the gateway to update them, and they have to be powered up and talking to us to push firmware to them. And then if we want to push firmware to the cases, that gateway's got to be operating, because that gateway will allow us to see every S3C in that store. So we could see anywhere from 1 to 32, or if you've got multiple comm loops, there could be 100 in that store.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be plugged into a specific lineup or communication loop.
It has to be. It is cabled to each communication loop through the Ethernet cable or the Cat5 cable. Okay. One cable to each one.
Okay.
To each gateway, I should say. You can't have multiple Ethernet cables plugged into a gateway or come back to the gateway through a switch. It gets a little confused.
Got it. And these gateways always get put in the right place, right? I mean, is there ever a time that
let me take that one, because I did have an interesting call one time where a technician was trying to get his store updated with firmware and check out a couple of small issues. Main thing was just trying to locate the gateways. We suggested they be mounted high on a wall and out in the open, because they do need to receive and transmit cellular signals to the nearby tower, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, whoever it is. I had one gentleman spend an inordinate amount of time, not by his fault at all, but found 6 of these gateways inside a lovely steel box. It was a watertight box, very protective of these devices, but unfortunately it doesn't allow communications to get to and from the gateways. So he ended up putting in a job list, a task request to get those gateways reinstalled. Typically you'll see them mount a sheet of plywood up high on a wall, might be a cinder block wall or a steel wall somewhere, that they can get the gateways mounted, kind of space them out in an array, so they can get signals, and that allows the application team then to find these gateways through the cellular cloud, if you will, and start helping out. But yeah, they get put in some strange spots. At another one, I believe it was sitting right on top of a large electrical transformer. So that humming and buzzing, that doesn't help either. So they just kind of have to think about, where would you go to try to make a cellular call with your own mobile device? And that's where we need those gateways to be of most help to them.
Makes sense. Dennis, I don't know how we're doing on time here, but Pat, you got something else you want to add?
I was just going to say on those gateways, and that's not all stores have gateways, by the way, but we can look by the store number and say, okay, there is a gateway in that store, and the guys will say, I can't find it. and unfortunately, it could be located anywhere in the footprint of that store. But there are stores without gateways, so be aware of that. And then the only way we can get into it is through the phone or
Okay.
walk someone through the display module.
Okay. Okay, cool. Anything more that either one of you want to add at this point?
Oh, one thing else I thought of is sometimes they will use terminal blocks to pre-wire everything for the case, and then they have to bring it down to the controller. And due to shipping or whatever, sometimes those connections on those terminal blocks will come loose. And the guy said, well, I've got my wires landed and they're tight on the controller. But if they went through a terminal block, you got to kind of backtrack through. If we're getting a code that or an alarm that says no sensor found or no valve found, sometimes it could be just a loose connection at those terminal blocks.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes sense. Anything else that either one of you want to?
One
We didn't
little
yet?
tool that I guess I didn't mention with the app, the ability to drive an EEPR, say it's a CDS valve. There you go.
Yeah.
You're right with me. You're reading my mind, Mr. Jansen. But the app can do that itself if you have an S3C. If you do not have an S3C type of controller and you can't Bluetooth in with your TechCheck app, that product that you have in your hands, the SMA-12, is a very handy device to have in your service truck or van. That can drive very slowly or rapidly drive the stepper motor of those products. So that helps in diagnosing whether a valve is truly moving. You can be connected, kind of use your ears and sometimes your hands on that to see if the valve is actually rotating, the motor is rotating. You'll feel it.
Stick the neck out here just a little bit and say we are working on a modified version of it. That's not quite ready for prime time yet, but it will be pretty cool when it becomes available. It's a little more compact and it will handle unipolar and bipolar applications when we do get it out there on the market, but it's still in the works project-wise.
Very good.
Dennis,
Yeah.
would you like to, I mean, we could talk for
No,
another hour, but I
No, I-
know you guys got honeydew projects to do and probably
Talk
naps
for
to take,
days.
and naps to take, and which I'm ready for one myself. Dennis, can you tell us or show us where else
Yes.
people could go to learn more about this product line?
Yeah, there's a lot of information we have out there. A lot of people just don't realize where you can find it. I am going to share my screen so I can show you exactly where to go. So if you go to YouTube, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Screen. Okay. All right. So if you go to YouTube /Sporlan video, this is our Sporlan video channel. And here is a plethora of information about all of our products, troubleshooting, Zoom Lock Max, we have some CO2 training out there, microthermal training. There's a lot of stuff out here. The easiest way to navigate it is to go to the playlists. If you go to the playlists, you'll see right here, Parker Sporlan S3C Case Control training. You click that, and then that's going to have all the training that we have. So if you look over here on your right, we have a bunch of, I think they're probably 45, 50-minute sessions for training. And then we have a lot of YouTube shorts that Jim Jansen has done. And these are under a minute. They're just going to tell you quick, simple things of a lot of calls that we get into application engineering, some common problems that people have found with S3C that we keep getting calls on. So if you just go through these shorts real quick, we have a bunch of them, but they're very helpful and they can help you out, with your S3C controller. You can also find it another way if you go to our Sporlan division. So if you go to our Sporlan division page, which you can also get there at sporlan.com, you scroll down to the bottom, go past the Zoom Lock stuff, and then you go to S3C Case Control Training and Commonly Asked Questions. You click View All, and that gives you a link directly to that playlist that you can also navigate from the YouTube channel. So there's several ways to get the same information. We just put them in different places so that people can access them different ways. So, all these things you can easily find on your phone if you're out in the field. Quickly, you can view the shorts, so it's a good source of information. Now, if you do want that training that we talked about earlier, The way you go to that right now, you go to sporlantraining.com. We are in the process of updating our training platform. So something should be coming out, in the next couple months on that. But where it stands right now, you go to sporlantraining.com, you create a password, login, username and login, and then you just go to your S3C training, and then you can take your training, and then you'll be able to use that Tech Check app once you pass that training. So that kind of gives you a overview of where you can find everything that we just talked about. So that's what I have.
I think that'd be really helpful. And that's
Yeah.
free of charge for anybody to go
Exactly.
access all of it, right?
Yep. Yeah, as all you have to do with the Sporlan training is just create the username and password. There's no cost involved. Obviously, our YouTube channel is free for everyone. And there's a lot of other stuff outside of S3C as well. So a lot of good information out there that Jim and John have been part of.
The whole team. Yeah, the whole team. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I can't thank everybody enough for doing this. I think this will be helpful to folks if they'll review it, and then certainly go to our website and look for more information. It will make them better techs. I think absolutely that's the case. I think Jim Reeder and Pat Bundy for joining us today. This is kind of our last great hurrah together, I guess you could say.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, it was great
Yeah,
seeing you guys again.
It's time for me to join you too, I think.
Well, I've had a lot
Dennis?
of titles in my career, but I have to say my favorite ones right now are retiree and
Retired.
grandpa.
Yeah. There you go.
I feel that more than you know. So thank you. Thank you. And again, thank you guys. You didn't have to agree to do this, and I really appreciate it. And Dennis, thanks for putting this together. And when you get it posted out there, hopefully everybody will watch it and they'll click like and subscribe.
Subscribe.
Yeah, to our stuff. Absolutely. And I guess we'll see everybody another time.
All right.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Take care.